You know, there was a time that you could walk into work or school on a Monday morning and you already knew what everybody was going to be talking about. And not because everyone had been texting each other or because the algorithm recommended it, but because everyone had watched and experienced the same things, the same cartoons, the same TV shows, the same summer blockbusters, the same music videos. All of it was shared. You could quote a line from your favorite movie without anybody having to ask what movie you were talking about. You could say something like, "I love it when a plan comes together," without any explanation of where that line came from. You could say all these things. You could do all these things because everyone was on the same page with the same shared experience and culture. That time is gone, and I don't think we fully understood what disappeared right along with it, because when we lost that shared culture, we lost something much bigger than entertainment. We lost our common ground. Well, today we're going to try to find it just a little bit. So pop that tape in. I got you. Let's go do this. So people hear this kind of conversation, especially younger people or older people, believe it or not, and they say, "Oh, it's just nostalgia. It was different because you were younger," and they just chalk it up as that it's just us talking about old movies, old TV shows, and music and toys and old memories. But that's not what this video is about. This is about something much more easily measurable, something more objective, something that existed for decades and then disappeared, and something whose disappearance had consequences that go far deeper and far bigger than just missing a Saturday morning cartoon. For roughly 50 years, from the 1940s through the 1990s, Americans shared a common cultural language, not because they chose to, but because they really had no option, right? The infrastructure of that made the experience the default between everyone. Fragmented individual experiences required serious effort at that time. Shared experience required nothing except turning on the TV or going to the movies or listening to the radio. Once that infrastructure disappeared, something happened that we are still trying to understand. We stopped speaking the same language, and it caused us to get further and further apart. So let me show you what I mean. Let me give you an example instead of just telling you. Show, don't tell. They teach us that in writing. Show, don't tell when you're doing something. So we're going to examine 3 time periods. You could call it 3 Monday mornings, 3 seasons, whatever you want to. But let's start Monday morning, 1984. Are you with me? We're going in the Wayback Machine. It's Monday morning, 1984, and everybody had watched the A-Team on Friday night before. Not some people, not a few people, not most people, almost everybody saw it. You didn't need to explain who Hannibal was, who Mr. T was, what the van looked like, what the catchphrases meant. You just quoted it, you reenacted it. The shared experience of Friday night television was the social currency that you spent on Monday morning. Now, if you want to go a little bit further, next in line, let's say it's a Monday in 1985 during the summer. Back to the Future had opened that weekend, and within 2 weeks, not one child in America failed to understand what a DeLorean was, what a flux capacitor was. Everyone knew 1.21 gigawatts. You could walk up to any stranger, a complete stranger, on the street, anywhere in the country pretty much, and say, "Great Scott," and they would finish the sentence. They would know exactly what you were talking about. It was one film, the entire country, same reference, same summer. That is very different now. But let's go ahead and give another example. How about we just jump back into the middle of those? Let's say Christmas morning, 1983. You wake up, you run downstairs, you run into the living room, the Christmas tree is there, and He-Man and the Masters of the Universe toys were there because that was the most wanted toy of that season. Not among certain kids, not among most kids, but just amongst kids in general. It was the highest selling toy on the planet, beating Star Wars. The Saturday morning cartoon reached over 50 million viewers per week. Almost every household with a television tuned in at some point to He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. If you were a child under 12 or 13, you were almost for sure watching it. One animated series, every kid in America watching it at the same time every week. 3 different years, 3 different types of content, same result every single time. A shared language that needed no explanation. That is what the monoculture actually was. Not a golden age, but a common age, a shared cultural space that everyone inhabited at the same time. And the mechanisms for how that worked were very limited, actually, but they were also immensely powerful at the same time. 3 major television networks overall. If something happened on ABC, NBC, or CBS on a Tuesday night, then literally everyone in America at the same time experienced it. No time shifting, no streaming. You watched it when it came on, when it aired, or you missed it. Radio with national charts, regional stations feeding into them. Casey Kasem's American Top 40 Countdown, which I mentioned on my summer video about this. This wasn't one of hundreds of options. It was the countdown. It was the American Top 40. The songs that reached number one in everybody's consciousness because everyone was listening and experiencing the same things. The theatrical release of films as cultural events. Before home video kind of democratized the movie experience just a little bit, when a movie opened in theaters, it was there for an extended period of time. And that was the only way you were going to see it for a long time, because once it finally left those theaters, it disappeared for months and months before finally coming out to rent at a video rental store. Then it would stay there for a month or two, and then you couldn't buy it for another blackout window. Then maybe you could buy a very expensive VHS. Otherwise, you were going to wait a really long time for something like HBO and even longer for broadcast television. So that's where you had to see it. It made it an event. It made it communal by necessity. Everyone went and experienced these things. The video store after that became our sort of shared inventory of these things, a catch-all where we could all come together, relive and re-experience these things, or somehow experience them for the first time because you've been hearing about them from everyone if you miss them. So there was a version of Top Gun on every shelf for everyone to finally see if they somehow missed it. Everyone in your neighborhood was choosing from the same titles, right? That's very different than streaming and different streaming services. The conversations at school were built around a shared pool of a culture instead of individualized algorithms and individualized entertainment. Those 4 mechanisms together created something extraordinary. Not just shared entertainment, a shared cultural identity that crossed every line that divided people in every dimension of life. And that's kind of the real loss that we're missing here. And this is part of the argument that matters the most, in my opinion, because the real loss wasn't television, it wasn't movies, it wasn't radio and music. The real loss was that Americans stopped having the same conversation with each other. For decades, culture acted like a bridge between us all. A kid in Georgia, a kid in California, a kid in New York, a kid in Kansas, different lives, different families, different problems, maybe different races. It didn't matter because all of them knew who Marty McFly was. They all knew who E.T. was, Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader. They all knew who Hulk Hogan was. They all remembered where they were the first time they heard "Don't You Forget About Me" or "Danger Zone" or "I Am Your Father." They all knew it. Culture gave us that common ground, and common ground is harder to lose than we realize until it is gone. The algorithm replaced that common ground with something that looks like more. It looks bigger, it looks like more, but functions like much, much less. It gave everyone a perfectly personalized cultural identity and took away our shared one. The result is a population that has more entertainment than any generation in history, more options, more entertainment, and unfortunately, we also have less in common with our neighbors than any generation in memory. That's not coincidence. That is a direct consequence of moving from a shared cultural infrastructure to an individualized one. And here's something else I want you to think about that I don't really hear a lot of other people. I've said it on this channel, but a lot of people don't really articulate this part clearly. Every decade from the 1950s through the 1990s has an immediately identifiable visual cultural identity, an aesthetic, a vibe. It's all there. You can show someone a photograph from 1955. They know it immediately. The cars, the fashion, the architecture, the graphic design, that post-war Americana optimism aesthetic written over every detail of the image. Show someone a photograph from 1965 or 67 and they immediately know it. The language of the counterculture beginning, the swinging late 60s there, the fashion shifting, the color palette changing, a decade with a face. And then you go to 1975, you got that texture of like the Vietnam era, Watergate America, earth tones, wide lapels, bell-bottom jeans, that kind of like exhausted but very alive quality of the country trying to figure out what it was after everything it had been through. And then you jump to 1985, and you don't even need context if you look at that photograph. One image and you know the shoulder pads, the neon, the maximalist America, hell yeah, optimism, confidence of a decade that believed in itself completely. Every action movie, every comedy, everything reflected that. The cars, the hair, the music, all of it saying 1985 with a visual language that needs absolutely no translation. And then you move to, let's say, 1997, and you got the grunge aesthetic mixed with the preppy aesthetic and mainstream fashion and that language of that design of the early web era beginning. In a decade that is unmistakable. The 90s is also unmistakable in its texture and its look. Now show someone a photograph from 2010, 2015, 2020s, whatever, and watch them struggle to tell them apart what year they were. That's because the last 20 plus years have no distinctive visual identity, no specific aesthetic, no specific vibe. Nothing belongs to this era because nobody belongs to it as a whole. No cultural vocabulary that future generations will look at and say immediately, that's from 2015, that's from 2010, that's from the 2020s, unless they got a mask on maybe. Why? Because the monoculture is what produced those distinctive decade identities. The shared experience of everyone watching the same television, hearing the same music, seeing the same films, wearing the same fashion, those shared cultural forces promoted at that time, and we were all in it together. That shared experience produced a specific and identifiable cultural aesthetic and common ground for each decade, and we've kind of just completely lost it. When the monoculture became fragmented into millions of individual algorithmic expressions, the shared language aesthetic of each era became impossible to produce because everyone is doing their own thing tailored to them. You cannot have a decade with a face, with a visual identity, a cultural identity, when nobody is looking or experiencing the same things. Think about it. You could be really into a show and ask 10 of your friends if they've seen it, and they got to ask you who's in it, what streaming service is it on, where do I watch it, all of those kind of things. That didn't used to happen. If you were watching Cheers, everyone was watching Cheers. That's how it was. Magnum PI, any of that. Everyone was watching it. We don't have a 2020s aesthetic because there's no shared 2020s experience for an aesthetic to emerge from. That is not some small casual observation either. That is one of the most concrete and visible consequences of losing that shared monoculture. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So when did the monoculture end? I may do a whole video just on that because it's truly fascinating, because I'll say it didn't end in one single day, but you can identify certain fractures that started causing it. Cable television was first. When cable first expanded, not original cable, but when cable expanded from a handful, a fair amount of channels to hundreds of channels, and then in a single evening, everyone became like, a prisoner of the choice, paralysis by analysis. They had one of hundreds of channels to pick from. That became harder. That was the first domino. By the mid-late 1990s, the idea that a single television program could reach 50% almost of American households like MASH finale did in 1983 was already becoming increasingly impossible because of the amount of choices and different cable providers. Then the internet began. It was a decisive fracture. It didn't just add options, it began to personalize those options. It created a mechanism by which every individual could construct a completely unique cultural diet, if you will, from an infinite menu of choices. The common ground that had survived the expansion of cable became structurally impossible when the menu became infinite to choose from. Streaming then comes along and it has finished the job. When Netflix and then every other major company moved to an on-demand or streaming format, the theatrical releases stopped being as important. They were going to rush everything to streaming. They were going to shorten release windows. All of that began to take away those other cultural moments that we came to connect together at the movie theater. I'll just wait for it to come to streaming. That became the modern refrain. There is no more video rental stores. We got rid of those too so that we can just go straight to streaming. So that other place that you met and shared the culture and experience, that's gone too. Now everything began completely transforming from a communal shared experience into a content delivery method. Each fracture was represented as progress, more choice, more convenience, more access, and each fracture cost us something that we didn't really understand the value of until it was gone. But here's what gives me hope. I'm all about hope here. I hate when they take hope out of horror movies and make them hopeless. Hope is the biggest thing that we have. So I'm going to give you some hope, and I'm going to give it to you with facts. And the fact is, the hunger for a shared culture has never went away. It was just suppressed by an algorithm, fragmented by streaming services and all of that trying to take it away. But the human need for common ground, for knowing the person next to you felt the same thing as you did, felt it at the same moment, it's not something that the algorithm can eliminate, nor any other force, no matter how hard they try. And the evidence is everywhere. Top Gun Maverick, $1.5 billion, a sequel to a 36-year-old film that broke through algorithmic fragmentation and became something everyone was talking about simultaneously. It happened this year out of nowhere, out of complete nowhere, with Project Hail Mary and then 2 independent horror films and Michael, going back to another 80s icon. The hunger with which people embraced a shared conversation and shared icons and shared experiences is still there. The success of those things and others, Pizza Hut coming back, these are things that tell you that everybody is craving that lost culture that we shared together. Even things like Stranger Things, a show that was a cultural phenomenon that built everything around the 1980s before it lost its way because of the outside forces of the fragmentation and the algorithm, it was about shared culture in and of itself. Sports still function as a shared culture. There are teams and fans of teams out there that are definitely in the culture together. And then the movies are coming back. Physical media is still here and doing well. Vinyl is here and doing well. The appetite is real. The need for all this stuff is genuine. It was never engineered away, no matter how much they wanted to make you believe that it was. And maybe that's why so many people get emotional when they see stuff like the old Pizza Huts coming back, or a Blockbuster sign, or you hear the NBC chimes, or an opening logo of a film you grew up with, or like the HBO movie of the week intro that we all loved so much, because those things aren't just memories of entertainment. They're memories of when our culture felt shared, when references landed, when everybody understood the joke, when everybody knew the song, when everybody saw the movie. Not because the entertainment was always better, but because the experience was always together. Like I said, a kid in Georgia, a kid in California, a kid in Kansas, all knowing who Marty McFly was, all knowing who Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker was, all quoting the same lines, all living inside the same cultural moment at the same time. That is what monoculture was. That is what we have lost. And if there's one thing that this channel has shown me in the 2 years since I started it, is that people still miss that world. They still want that world. More so than they can even easily say. More than the algorithm will ever understand. So that's what I got for you today. Let me know your thoughts on this. Drop your cultural memory moments in the comments below. The Monday morning when you came in and everybody was talking about the same thing at school, when you were doing the crane kick at the bus stop, the summer when one film was the only film that everybody couldn't stop talking about, the Christmas where every kid wanted the same toy or toys, because that memory is the proof of the need that all of that never left. It is still here waiting. So that's what I got for you. Subscribe, like, all that stuff. I really do appreciate it. My Patreon link is below. You'll find lots of extra stuff there. And if you like these kind of videos, let me know. It really does mean a lot. But until next time, be kind, rewind like always. This is Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye. I know.